The day was October 31, 1974, Halloween. Like the rest of the United States, the kids and families of Pasadena, Texas were all out trick-or-treating. 39-year-old Ronald Clark O'Brien, an optician at Texas State Optical in Houston, and his friend Jim Bates had accompanied Ron's 2 children and Jim's son out trick-or-treating that fateful night. After the group encountered a house with the lights turned off, the classic "no one's home" signal on Halloween, Ron told the rest of the group that someone had eventually answered the door and given him pixie sticks for the kids. The pixie sticks were handed out, and the group continued on their way without a second thought. After they were done trick-or-treating for the day, Ronald and his wife started getting the kids ready for bed. Naturally, 8-year-old Timothy asked his parents if he could have a piece of candy before bed, and picked out the pixie sticks as his treat. Only mere moments after taking his first bites of the pixie sticks, Timothy began convulsing and vomiting, and then went limp. The boy was rushed to the hospital, but it was sadly already too late. Timothy's autopsy showed that he had consumed enough cyanide to kill 2 to 3 people, and he had passed away in a matter of minutes. In a rush to discover where the tainted candy had come from, police asked the parents of Pasadena to turn in their children's Halloween candy. The only other poisoned candy, however, came from the O'Brien group, all pixie sticks. These other pixie sticks had also been laced with cyanide. Obviously, the people who lived at the house Ron had gotten the pixie sticks from were initially the primary suspects. However, the man who lived there was quickly cleared with an ironclad alibi. He had been at work that night, leaving police scratching their heads. Meanwhile, while he wasn't initially considered a suspect, Ronald had been acting more and more suspicious over the course of the investigation. First, he had claimed he couldn't remember which house had given him the pixie sticks, despite the fact that the group had only trick-or-treated on a few streets that night. Although he eventually remembered which house it was, it took a long conversation with police before he revealed this information. Put off by Ronald's behavior, after the man who lived at that house was cleared, they began looking more into Ronald himself. Their investigation would reveal something very suspicious, namely, that Ronald was having some rather intense financial troubles. Not only was he $100,000 in debt, Ron seemed to have difficulties holding down a job. He'd had 21 different jobs over the past 10 years. It isn't known how or why he ended up leaving all these different jobs, but he was apparently suspected of theft at his current job with Texas State Optical, so you can do the math there. On top of the debt and difficulties holding down a job, Ronald's car was about to be repossessed, he had defaulted on several bank loans, and the family's house had been foreclosed on. In short, Ronald was on the verge of bankruptcy and complete financial ruin if he didn't figure out a way to turn his finances around quickly. Unfortunately, Ronald Clark O'Brien had chosen the worst possible route to relieving his financial troubles. In January 1974, he took out $10,000 life insurance policies on both of his children. He took out further life insurance policies throughout the year. By Halloween 1974, the life insurance policies he had taken out on his own children amounted to over $60,000, which is equivalent to over $342,000 today. Clearly, young children who are in good health don't need life insurance policies of that caliber, and these actions very heavily point to the idea that Ronald was planning to kill his own children in order to cash in these insurance policies. The final nail in the coffin was when witnesses told police that in the days and months leading up to Halloween 1974, Ronald seems to have been seeking out ways to buy cyanide. With the evidence piling up, Ronald was eventually brought in and charged 1 count of capital murder and 4 counts of attempted murder. While there was a fair bit of evidence against him, technically the evidence was all circumstantial, as in, there was no physical evidence linking Ronald to the crime, just highly suspicious behavior that is very difficult to write off or explain away. Ronald's trial was set for May 5, 1975. Right off the bat, things didn't go well for Ron. Friends, family and coworkers alike all testified against him. The prosecution presented evidence that Ronald had taken an odd interest in cyanide in the months leading up to the crime, and in addition had been trying to figure out how to purchase cyanide in the days leading up to his son's death. That, combined with the fact of Ronald's money troubles and all those insurance policies he took out, not to mention he was the only person known to have access to the pixie sticks before Timothy consumed it, painted a troubling picture to say the least. Ronald's lawyers mainly focused on the fact that the prosecution's evidence was almost entirely circumstantial. However, they had little to counter the circumstantial evidence that the prosecution provided. They weren't able to produce a particularly compelling reason for why Ronald had suddenly taken such an interest in cyanide, or why he took out those insurance policies. They also had a difficult time presenting a compelling alternative suspect or motive. Instead, the alternative theory they presented mainly focused on the urban legend of a boogeyman using Halloween as a way to poison random children. However, the defense wasn't able to produce any actual documented cases of a stranger poisoning Halloween candy to kill a random child. It was really more fear-mongering than fact. So, despite there being no physical evidence linking Ronald to the crime, there was also no plausible alternative theory that suggested anyone besides Ronald could have been guilty of poisoning Timothy, and attempting to poison the other children. Ultimately, it only took the jury 46 minutes to find Ronald guilty on all 5 counts, and only 71 minutes to decide to give him the death sentence. As most who are sentenced to death do, Ronald and his team appealed his conviction many times. The appeals dragged out in court, with the date of Ronald's execution scheduled and rescheduled a number of times over the years. It took almost 10 years for Ronald's sentence to actually be carried out. Eventually, however, Ron ran out of options, and Ronald Clark O'Brien, aka the Candyman, was executed by lethal injection on March 31, 1984. Even after his death, Ronald's influence has had a long-lasting impact on the holiday. While Ronald Clark O'Brien's horrific crime weren't the origin of the fear of strangers poisoning children's Halloween candy, in fact, he had almost certainly been playing off this fear, hoping it would help him cover up his crimes, his actions definitely playing a huge role in causing that fear to become irrevocably ingrained into the holiday. Even now, almost 50 years later, many parents and communities will warn their children to be wary of the candy they accept on Halloween, and to keep an eye out for opened or resealed candy. Ultimately, Ronald Clark O'Brien's crimes not only resulted in the death of his own son, but played a huge role in tainting Halloween for many others, hence why he is sometimes known as the man who killed Halloween.